Sure. So Confluence Environmental Center is a nonprofit in Portland, Oregon, and we have an AmeriCorps program. And we work on addressing specifically environmental equity in the Portland metro area. And that's through these really innovative partnerships with local organizations and nonprofits, community groups, as well as our public agencies here in the city and some of the school districts. So I'm sure your listeners know through AmeriCorps by this point, there are so many trajectories you could go. And our program really focuses on environmental and social justice, which is unique to AmeriCorps. And something that really helps us stand out is these partnerships that host our AmeriCorps members.
Hey folks, we are back with another AmeriCorps alum on the AmeriCorps Connections podcast. And if you've landed on this podcast, then that means you are in for a wonderful ride. We are in the middle of our 2024 Recruitment Extravaganza, where we are interviewing AmeriCorps alumni who are recruiting for current AmeriCorps members. So this is the AmeriCorps Connections podcast. I'm Nicki Fiocco. I'm the brainchild behind this podcast. And it really came to fruition because, I served as an AmeriCorps member in 2011, 2012 with Volunteer Maryland. One of the things I got out of that service year was my ability to make connections, to keep connections and nurture relationships. And I just think that's so important. And for folks that don't know, right now is a really important time. It's June of 2024, and between May and August-ish, and sometimes a little further, a lot of AmeriCorps programs are recruiting for new members to serve in the upcoming year. And we've had such transformational experiences that we want more and more people to have this experience and know the opportunities that are available. This is really, you can really look at a service year as kind of create your own adventure, whatever you're interested in. And you only have to do it for a year, right? Like, this is not a big job that you're making a huge life commitment to. This is a year of service, or sometimes a little shorter. So we're going to get into all of that with Ashlie. So I'm super excited that you're here with us on the special series of the recruitment. But before we get started, as always, thank you so much, Dan Medevere from Time or Money Services, for getting this podcast out on all the platforms. He's an NCCC alum, and he was the first person to step up and be like, you need to be on Spotify, you need to be on iTunes. And I honestly didn't know how to do it. I knew how to record Zoom calls and upload them to YouTube. And so we have those two platforms. And then, very excited, in 2024, the folks at Do Good Be Good, Sharon Tewksbury Bloom, reached out and said she wanted to support the program too through her company. And I am very, very much excited to be partnering with them. They're helping me with on the back end marketing. And a lot of the folks that are on this recruitment series now were brought to the podcast through her newsletter. So if you haven't signed up for her newsletter and you want information about her trainings, Do Good, Be Good. Thank you so much for your support. So now, I don't think I have anything else. So Ashlie's coming to us from Oregon. Is that right?
Yes,
right?
Portland,
Oregon. And I'm on you're on the left coast. I'm on the east coast, the west, whatever. I don't know which side of the hands we are. And you are a two-time AmeriCorps alumni.
That's right.
And you're recruiting for AmeriCorps members. So let's start out with, how did you find out about AmeriCorps, and what kind of led you into that journey, and how did you make the decision to serve for a year?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. You're combining two of my favorite things here with podcasts and AmeriCorps, and something we do, I feel like, in service is just connecting people with resources, connecting people with each other. So
Totally.
really enjoyed the theme here. I'm excited to be here. I started and heard about AmeriCorps during my undergrad. I was part of a program called Environmental Leadership, and they posted in a Facebook group for alumni. I just graduated and all of my friends had jobs lined up, and I was still interviewing, and I found this AmeriCorps position that was in northern Idaho, where my mom's side of the family had grown up. And so I was familiar with it, and I applied. Funny story, didn't get it. And I actually responded to the email asking, thank you so much. What else could I have done differently? And I got a call about 2 weeks later saying that their first choice had backed out. And because of that response that I sent, asking how can I continuously improve, they really wanted to bring me on board to the team. So I was excited to join Palouse Clearwater Environmental Institute as an environmental educator there. And it actually led me to a second term right after that down in Arizona. So taking one experience, and I feel like one thing has always led for the next in my career.
I think it's awesome that you had mentioned that you responded to the email and said, what else could I have done? Because a lot of times we're just like licking our wounds and we're like, nobody loves me, or screw them, I'll find another opportunity. So super reflective that you were like, no, like what else could I have done? And then that led you to your service year. And then what made you do another service year?
Yeah, so my position was a general environmental educator, which I know through your podcast we've talked a lot about. You wear a lot of hats with
Yeah.
AmeriCorps. You can try so many different things, choose your own adventure. And so I really dove into that. And I was
Mm,
learning about water quality and water education and the geology behind aquifers. We were taking students out on after school trips. I got asked to lead a natural history like rafting trip from some high school students. So I got to really dabble in a lot during that first year of service and decided that some of the focus areas I wanted to grow more into was around water conservation and water quality.
mm.
And so I found another AmeriCorps position with the Nature Conservancy this time down in Phoenix, Arizona, who had a really great project partner with a program called Project Wet, Water Education Today. So it helped me direct my interests. It also helped me decide maybe more of what I didn't enjoy.
Yes.
And so it helped really steer me in that in a more focused direction, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, sometimes we find out what we want when we know what we don't want. Like,
Exactly right.
don't want any of that. That's what was your background? You may have said it, but I may have missed it. What was your background in school?
So when I started undergrad, I didn't know what I wanted to focus in. I just continued taking general education requirements until it started adding up to a degree,
Mm,
which was in psychology.
okay.
But I did really enjoy my extracurriculars in environmental studies, environmental science. So
Uh,
I got a double minored in business and then environmental studies. And that led me to my environmental leadership program senior year, where we spent one term learning about environmental education and what teaching in a classroom looks like. And then that spring term, we got to go implement it and practice some of our lesson plans we had created. My team specifically worked on renewable energy in a third grade classroom. So I took some of those skills into the first AmeriCorps role as an environmental educator, thinking maybe I did want to become a teacher. Maybe I wanted to get my
mhm.
teaching certificate. And going back to realizing what you're not so interested in, it
Yeah.
steered me in a different direction. So I do appreciate that. And it led me down to Arizona, where I decided I wanted to go back to school. I applied for graduate school, got my master's in environmental science,
Wow.
and got to continue in the service learning industry, working both internationally and in the US, teaching and leading trips for high school students and their teachers, parents. It was a long trajectory, but I spent about 6 years being able to implement service learning and hands-on experiences, both abroad and in communities in the US. So that was really cool to come full circle and then end up where I am today in another AmeriCorps program on staff in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up.
That's so cool. What an amazing opportunity. I want to like dive in. I'll have to have you back on the podcast and we can dive in exactly what you were doing. I have an environmental studies background as well. And I did an internship with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center out here in Maryland. And we did all kinds of things. And we did a lot of environmental education with students. And I also was like, I really like the environmental studies part of this. The classroom can be someone else's management issues. It's like,
That's
no,
exactly right. Yes.
Johnny's touching me. Yeah, okay. I'm hot. Yes, it's hot. It's just hot, right? Um, but I love how you kind of found that thread from your what you studied into what you got your post secondary education and everything. So in Arizona, how was the experience different from your first experience? Now that was more education, but this was more what, field work?
Yeah, so we were doing a lot of field trips. I was doing a lot of volunteer engagement,
Mm.
volunteer recruitment, and then I really got to help with partnering more with the teachers themselves and building out
Ah,
a symposium where, it was a year-long curriculum with teaching teachers on water education curriculum, and then bringing together, going in throughout the school year and doing some lesson plans with their students, but providing the resources, providing the curriculum for teachers to implement themselves, as well as some trainings for them additionally, ending in a big annual symposium at the end of the year where fifth graders got to come and present what they learned. And a lot of them had participated in a water audit earlier in the year where they got to come and test out all the faucets in their school to see how much the water was flowing. They got to calculate it, working on some of their math. And then they put low flow aerators on the faucets and got to measure
oh,
how much water they are now saving their school by doing so. So it was still more education, but we were bringing those students out into different environments, trying to recruit volunteers to come and coordinate and work with them. And then I also got to take that teaching level up by teaching teachers.
that's so cool. I love, and so we're talking about Arizona, folks. If you don't know about Arizona, like water retention is really important. I think they're like, don't have lawns, have rocks in your front yard. Like there will be no watering of lawns. That's so cool. So what else, is there anything that else that you want to reflect on from your service year that brought you into kind of the opportunities that you're doing now?
The biggest one was just continuing to connect with my network. It was keeping
Hmm.
up my relationships, and something we say in our program called Confluence Environmental Center here in Portland is it's about who you meet along the way. And so as long as you're able to keep in touch with those folks, every year or two, I would reach out to the individuals, maybe it was my mentors or my supervisors in those AmeriCorps roles, or even some of the teachers that I'd really connected with, and just give them an update. Like, hey, this is what I've been up to recently. I hope all is well with you. Keeping those touch points has led me to where I am today. I was starting to feel a pull back to the Portland area back in 2019, and reached out to my supervisors at my first position up in Idaho. And they happened to know of the current role I'm in and the program I'm in today, where I was exactly looking. So I wasn't able to find that position through my own research, but it was my network that got me there. So keeping those connections, I think, is one of the most important things I've learned throughout my career.
Absolutely. And that's just such great advice for anybody that's doing anything. It's not just making those connections, it's nurturing those connections. Um, I just recently, actually today, reached out to a commissioner when I was at the governor's office of service and volunteerism. I'm like, are you in this area? Like, he's in the Cincinnati area, and I'm going to be in that area. And it's just going to make things a little bit easier for me when I go. I'm not moving, nothing. I'm not quitting my job. Don't worry. Um, but I have some things that are happening in that area. So it's nice to be like, oh, hey, could you like show me around or whatever? And we have to keep those connections. And I think something else that's really important is to provide value, to not just, touch base with folks, but also provide value of like, this is what I'm doing and I want to invite you in, or provide some type of connection for you above and beyond what we have going on.
Yeah,
So
I love that. It's also, I feel like, sharing maybe how they impacted where you're at today, like how you've been able to utilize what you learned through your relationship with them and your experience with them and how it got you to where you are today. And I feel like it
yes.
always comes full circle later on.
Totally. Um, all right. So you did your service years, you figured out what you wanted to do with your life. You went back to Portland. This amazing opportunity opened up. What is this amazing opportunity? And what are you recruiting for?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to share. So Confluence Environmental Center is a nonprofit in Portland, Oregon, and we have an AmeriCorps program. And we work on addressing specifically environmental equity in the Portland metro area. And that's through these really innovative partnerships with local organizations and nonprofits, community groups, as well as our public agencies here in the city and some of the school districts. So I'm sure your listeners know through AmeriCorps by this point, there are so many trajectories you could go. And our program really focuses on environmental and social justice, which is unique to AmeriCorps. And something that really helps us stand out is these partnerships that host our AmeriCorps members.
Hey, I want to let you know about an event that Goodwill Northern New England is doing as part of their efforts to build a community of AmeriCorps alums everywhere. On July 18th at 5 p.m. Eastern, AmeriCorps Vista alum Maya Williams shares the story of her service, their best writing tips, and her biggest tips to adjusting to life after service. During their service at Equity, Maine, Maya developed programming for LGBTQ plus youth. She then became a published poet and Portland's seventh poet laureate. If you are ready to join a community of AmeriCorps alumni, then don't delay. Register for this free event today by clicking in the show notes.
So a unique thing about how we recruit is a lot of times our members find our organization and opportunities through our host sites. So through the school districts, Portland Public School, through the community colleges we have here, a lot of the housing authorities and the city of Portland, the city of Gresham, we have Washington County. There's such a variety of opportunities that a lot of our host sites are able to recruit from their own volunteer networks and be able to bring on folks that are already in their local communities, already interested in the work or in that organization. A lot of nonprofits and local group organizations are able to partner with us to address anything from food insecurity to watershed health, waste diversion, and the list goes on. So we have a lot of these partnerships that really help separate us apart and ideally lead into full-time jobs for our members.
That's always a benefit when you hear that at the end, and oftentimes lead to a full-time job. I like to always say a service year is like a year-long interview, that you don't have to commit to. When I was director of Volunteer Maryland, we also were like an intermediary where we placed members across the state. And so many times when we were doing recruitment, we're like, look internal for your volunteers. And it was always like 50-50, like 50% of the sites found the AmeriCorps member and then 50% Volunteer Maryland, or we found it and placed them. But I think that's like such good advice when organizations are partnering with AmeriCorps programs to really look at like who's around you. And is there an age range that you have for your program?
Such an interesting question because it's really changed throughout the years. I feel like traditionally and historically, AmeriCorps members have been between 18 to 25 years of age, and that's still somewhat typical for us, a lot of recent grads. However, in the most recent years, we've seen folks looking to pivot into more of a second career choice, something that's more impactful, something that's more socially oriented, specifically working on climate and climate activism, climate change. So we've seen a lot of folks that are looking to get their foot in the door, specifically in Portland and in the environmental industry. And so they're coming from a wide range of experiences. And then as well as from the communities that are being served. So we have some residents at some of the housing authorities that have become members. And so they might be skewing older, maybe over 50. But altogether, we have up to 20 positions every year that start in September, and it creates a cohort of 20 other like-minded individuals that are all serving across the same metro area, but coming together for trainings 2 to 3 times a month and really being able to share those experiences with each other, bring challenges to the group to try and work through. Because it's a big commitment for 11 months and there's a lot of opportunity. It's how you make the most of it. So leaning into the cohort and those growth opportunities is a really great way to do that.
Yeah. And I think something that we want to point out is that the AmeriCorps member will have the experience at the service site doing the thing, right? Like that's where you get the connections and you get the skills and at the thing at the service site. But then there's those other trainings that you have within the cohort that is just an added benefit to why it would be so important to join your program because you get X, Y, and Z training. So what are some of the trainings focused around that the AmeriCorps members will experience during their service year?
Yeah, so at Confluence Environmental Center, that really is what sets our program apart is our leadership development opportunities. It comes to equivalent of about $23,000 that we offer to our members, specifically around equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice topics, really leaning in to what that looks like in the environmental field. We have a specific day of training on how white supremacy shows up in the environmental industry. We also look into popular education models. So how can we use community knowledge to share and educate each other? We have a financial literacy series. And so it really is diverse on trying to provide the skills and resources to set our members up for success from the get-go. We also provide $100 as a training fund for our members to pursue their own interests. So we usually say that our positions are 80%, 20%. 80% at your site, it's really where you're focusing on those position requirements. But the rest, that 20% is for you. You are receiving compensation to try new things, to go to webinars, go to trainings, go to conferences, do informational interviews, job shadow. You're getting paid to receive those trainings and to pursue those relationships and really build out your toolkit, where in a lot of other environments that might look like having to pay for those.
I think that's such a good point, and something that in this like data-driven world of ours, where it's like how many members of the community are serving, how many trees are you planting, how many hours of volunteerism are you doing, it's really difficult to track the impact of an individual who has gone through a service year like this, and like what is the return on investment for a program of $25,000 of personal development or it's personal and professional development. Like, where is that person now, and you can't, it's like the the book Upstream by Dan, his last name is not in my head, but anyways, it's like hard to track where something that wouldn't have happened because there was this intervention, right? Like if somebody's part of a program and their trajectory of their career has gone a certain way because of those, we'll say interventions or whatever, the trainings, it's so hard to be like, well, they would have been in another place, but we don't know. We can't, measure for that. So I think your point is so important when we think about national service, and I don't know, like funding AmeriCorps at the federal level. Like we're literally funding, I'm not even going to say future leaders, because that's not necessarily true, but it's like bringing people into the workforce with value and purpose that will keep them in the workforce and move things forward, right? Like the slogan is "Get things done in AmeriCorps," right? And these are folks that are going to be in the workforce, and they are going to move things forward. They're going to move projects forward. They're going to run for politics or political positions and solve problems, because that's what they've done during their AmeriCorps year, and they've gotten support behind it. So I don't know if you want to speak more to that, because I think when somebody's thinking about a service year, they might be thinking like, oh, I really want to get into social work and I want to make everybody, but it's also like, what do you want to pour into yourself and what do you want to learn?
Yeah, exactly right. We call it planting the seed. There's so many
Love it.
ripple effects that come after the fact. And our members during their 11 months terms of service are pushed to unlearn while learning, right? That's a big position in our cohort. And those relationships that they're building, one thing always leads to the next. You'll keep hearing me say that. And a sign of success for our program is, again, our members being hired on, whether it's at the same site that they were serving, or maybe a host site that was also in our partnership that they got to volunteer with. We also offer a CAP project for our members, which is a change agent project, where they can go to a community group or find a passion project that they're really interested in and ask them, is there anything that you need done? These are my skills. How can I help pair that with that? How can we solve this problem together? And then we see our members get hired on in those different capacities. Then they become AmeriCorps supervisors that are now hosting our Confluence AmeriCorps members. And it just keeps building. So being able to plant those seeds within our program and then, see the ripple effects grow throughout the years is something that's been really exciting for us at Confluence.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love the becoming AmeriCorps supervisors and then having that impact. Like, it's just feel like I could just go on forever with you just saying like, yes, this is so wonderful. It's like everybody should do this and everybody should invest in it. The federal government should invest in that. I can say this because the podcast isn't sponsored by anybody. So
Thank
like,
you. Yes, let's keep
yeah,
saying it.
yeah, exactly. Like, hey, if you think this is a great program or you're a part of it, like reach out to your senator and see if we can get like, I don't know, our budget filled for 2025. So anyways, all that to be said, what's the recruitment process like for, is it Confluence? What's the name of the program?
Yep, Confluence Environmental Center, Confluence for
Confluence
short.
Environmental Center. Okay.
Yeah, so you can find, we have 15 current positions posted to our website, just confluencecenter.org right now. We're hoping to post 2 to 3 more in the next few weeks, but our positions are live and our application instructions start by applying to the host site. Apply to the project
Mm,
supervisor. You're going to send your resume, your cover letter, and your references there, and they're going to be that first interview process. They're going to be able to coordinate next steps. And then they will send their top 3 candidates to Confluence come July 19th. It's on a
okay.
rolling basis, but we like to tell our interested applicants to get your applications in around by July 12th to ensure that you're going to be part of that interview process. Some sites do have different deadlines. But that's the first step, and you can apply to as many positions as you want. There's so many amazing, interesting opportunities. Some even with the same site, they have up
Oh,
to 4
nice.
positions at some of our sites that are, you get to coordinate and work on a team of AmeriCorps members, which is really great. And so from there, top 3 candidates get sent to Confluence, and then we perform a second round interview to ensure that it's going to be a good fit, and that applicant understands what the Confluence side of things are and what that relationship and partnership is with their host site, that 80-20 time split. And then positions are offered in August, and we start our member orientation Wednesday, September 4th, and go for 11 months till the end of the following July.
How many cohorts have gone through Confluence?
This is going to be our 14th.
Oh wow, that's amazing. And are you funded through the Service Commission or are you a national direct?
Yeah, so we half of our we get the AmeriCorps federal grant, and then we bring in our own match through our host sites, who will also pay to host an AmeriCorps member through Confluence.
Hmm.
And we've just done a pilot program with a few different opportunities to increase our member living allowances, because that's something that is a huge priority for our
Yeah.
organization. I don't know how many of your listeners are aware that the AmeriCorps stipend is set at a national level. So the folks that are serving in the Midwest are being provided the same as someone over here in the Pacific Northwest, where our living costs are quite higher. So
Hmm.
that's something that our program, our small and mighty team, we have 2 full-time staff, 1 part-time staff, and then a
Wow.
volunteer board of 4 folks who I will say are all, our whole team, our leadership and program director, our BIPOC and Black, Indigenous, and person of color led, women led, some as well as AmeriCorps, if not Confluence AmeriCorps alumni. So really cool to have that leadership. And we've been looking at opportunities to be able to increase that program living stipend on top of what the federal government has been providing.
That's so cool. When I was at South Carolina Commission, we had a member emergency fund, and it was supported through a grant through the Mott Foundation, and then it was matched by a local foundation in South Carolina. I can't remember what it was, but anyways, an AmeriCorps member could have up to $500 during their service year for anything that was an emergency that popped up, and they were just, and it was so cool because, well, I mean, it wasn't cool, the people needed it, but what was so interesting is the majority of the folks that needed the support were for their vehicles, and the majority of the vehicle issues were like tires. And if you think about it, like I remember I had to get tires and it was like $350 and I need it like on the spot. And so I think some of those extra things, like definitely increasing the living stipend, but any of those extra perks, like the $100 in professional development, really help AmeriCorps members out. And what was really interesting is the AmeriCorps members who utilized the emergency funds, their retention rate of staying in the program was 90% more than the AmeriCorps members that didn't have to or didn't use that funding. So it's really important to have those kinds of perks and to think about like the member experience and what might come up where unfortunately AmeriCorps members have to leave a service year. You know, we don't want them to, but sometimes they have to. But what are the things that we can support them in to keep them in their service? Because they are not getting paid a ton of money.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, ideally, yes, Congress, they wouldn't be needing an emergency fund.
Yes.
But that is something that the Oregon Serves Commission has recently been able to roll out through partnership with the
Oh,
Schultz
nice.
Foundation. There's an emergency fund available to our current members that qualify. So that is something that we've seen. And we've been able to advocate for that growth as well. We hope to see more. And additional partnerships we've been able to pursue is TriMet passes. So that's public transportation for all of our members,
Oh, wow.
which is something that is going to be expanding into an alumni perk. So when they join our program, not only will it be for that term of service, but also for the second year after as they continue to pursue jobs in education. So hopefully being able to keep them in service and keep them
Yeah.
pursuing what's next for them. And another one that was really exciting to come on board in the last 2 years was a membership with Bike Town. So Nike has their Portland headquarters here. And so having access to bike memberships throughout the city is another opportunity that our members have access to. So we've seen a lot of growth in how to provide those wraparound services so that what members are bringing home in their living stipend, they can hold on to and isn't
Yeah.
being spent on living. And our host sites have really jumped on board with us here and being able to provide alternative and outside benefits from what our program can, since it all has to be uniform coming from Confluence Environmental Center. But seeing what our host sites can provide on top, we're seeing folks that are being able to access really like national conferences and transportation being covered for that. Even housing has been covered for some folks. Things as small as like discounts and access to employee stores for like Columbia Sportswear and things like that. Our host sites are really jumping on board along with our team and our board of directors on while we're working on increasing that stipend, how else can we alleviate those pain points?
So good. That's that, you know, we haven't, out of all my interviews, I think we really touched on a lot of those perks and extra things that, especially the intermediary partnerships that are doing. So that's really exciting to hear. I was just having a conversation before this with another recruitment alumni, and I'm like, every single time I have an interview, I'm like, I want to do that service. I'm like, I've never lived in Oregon before. Maybe this sounds like a great service here for me.
Right? I know we just
Yeah.
posted our live AmeriCorps positions, and then that's kind of where my tell is like, would I do this position? And every time it's
Yes.
a heck yes. There's some
Yes.
really exciting opportunities that we have here in Portland.
I love that. Ashlie, this has been so great. Before we start to wrap things up, is there anything else that you want listeners and viewers to know about either your service year or the program that you're recruiting in, or both?
Yeah, so with AmeriCorps, we've seen a lot with the employment opportunities at this time, the workforce out there. It can be really challenging. And one thing with AmeriCorps is it's a great way to get your foot in the door. A lot of those entry-level positions, they still require 3 to 5 years of
Yep.
experience, but how are you going to get that experience if you don't get the job first? So AmeriCorps is a foot in the door to provide that. And then once you're in the door, you have 11 months and great resources to really pursue what your interests are and to make the most of it. So you've mentioned it in the past, it's choose your own adventure. For us, it's what you make of it. So really
Mhm.
building those relationships and then leaning into alumni and that network. You are a part of
Yes.
that million and plus network of AmeriCorps alum, and you never know what opportunities are going to come up. Keep those connections and relationships strong, even if it has been a few years since you've talked to folks. Just keep building those bridges, and I feel like it always leads to the next thing.
100%. I mean, just even since I've started this like in my career of national service, the connections just went wild, especially when, I started as an AmeriCorps member, then I was a director of a program, then I was director of commissions, and then you get that like 50,000-foot view, where I was in the room with the Mott Foundation talking about the project in South Carolina. And then to be able to like come back down to this individual level of like, it's really about continuing like the connections and just keeping even through this podcast, I've been able to say, oh yeah, I know somebody in San Antonio that is, whatever. It's like so important. And if you're not, I need to get I need to get sponsored by LinkedIn. I swear, because I mention LinkedIn every time. But if you're not part of the LinkedIn AmeriCorps alum group, like figure out how to be part of that network, because there's so much great stuff happening back and forth. And there's like 22,000 people in there. So there's 1.3 million AmeriCorps alumni who have gone through the program. And so, just keep those connections. So this is so great. I'm so excited to learn more about your program. And I love that we connected. And thank you, Sharon Tewksbury Bloom, for putting out such an amazing newsletter where people are like, I want to be on this podcast. So before we wrap up, any last thoughts or anything else?
Yeah, just thank you so much, Nicki, for this opportunity. This AmeriCorps network is so wide. It's really great to be able to tap into it and connect, since Confluence really does have a lot of opportunities in the environmental field that could turn into a wider range of opportunities for our members. We have alumni that ended up going to law school, we have others in fire ecology. We have others that are on the boards of directors, sitting with watershed councils. So the possibilities are truly endless, and that's something that we think is really exciting about Confluence Environmental Center. Is it's all focused on environmental equity and social justice in the Portland metro area, but that can look like teaching, it could look like volunteer recruitment, it could look like community engagement. So if you have any inkling of interest, I
Yes.
highly recommend committing to 11-month term and seeing where it takes you.
Love it. Commit to an 11-month term. See where it's going to take you. All right. Thank you so much, Ashlie. Thank you all for listening to the AmeriCorps Connections podcast. And we'll have another recruitment series coming out soon. So stay tuned and see you on the other side. Take care.
Thanks, Nicki.